Do you hate memorizing vocabulary lists? So do a lot of my students. So I tried to take a more fun approach, and it completely backfired. Here's what happened. Now, in my previous videos, some of you guys were disappointed that my vocabulary learning methods include memorization. And I get it. Not everybody wants to be mugging up lists and lists of words every day, right? There had to be a more fun approach. Now, I don't know if you can tell that I enjoy reading a lot and also watching television. So I decided to incorporate learning vocabulary around these two fun activities of reading books and watching television over the last few days. To experiment with this method, I first went to Amazon and purchased a short stories in Spanish book, which was recommended to me by one of my students. And I already had a Netflix subscription which I used to change the audio of my shows from English to Spanish. At first, I started reading whenever possible. During my commute, during my breaks, before bed. This book arrived a little late from Amazon and hence I started reading my comic books. But because these books were so interesting and fun, there was no pressure to actually force myself to read. I was actually enjoying the whole process of reading itself, as well as watching my favorite movies and TV shows. So what I did here is simply go to the audio settings, change it from English to Spanish, sometimes enabling and sometimes disabling the subtitles. So while this has been a very fun week, I did not realize that I was setting myself up for failure. The problem here was that I made no effort to retain any of the vocabulary that I was learning. I had adopted a very passive approach which just included receiving a lot of input in Spanish and no effort to retain it. So guess what happened? I did not retain it. I forgot all of it. If you ask me today what new vocabulary I learned in the first or second day of doing this, I don't remember. And if I wasn't remembering what I was learning, then what was the whole point? So a simple solution to this problem was maintaining a vocabulary list in a notebook. Now, I'm not saying this has to be any hard and fast rules. This book has my rough notes, any vocabulary or any sentence structures that I came across, mainly from TV, because once I started realizing this problem about retention, I started taking notes while I was reading, as well as, yes, I made some notes in this book while I was watching TV. Now, that included any sentences or any vocabulary that I liked, and because I had them in context, I even wrote it down a little bit in context so I knew what it meant. Now, having my vocabulary down in one notebook in one place made it possible for me to review this the next time I came to it, which means that I was now practicing active recall or repetition, which made retention possible, and that is the whole point. You have to come back to what you have learned in order to remember it. Just seeing it once somewhere will not guarantee that you will remember it, not always. So this simple method of writing it down in a notebook made all the difference. So after a week of practicing all of this, I conclude with 2 points. Number one, fun methods are great. They're fantastic and they keep you consistent, which is one very important thing to do when it comes to language learning. But at the same time, if you are not practicing any form of active recall or repetition or just revision, you are going to miss out on the whole point of this and you might not even remember what you've been learning. And point number two, a passive approach like mine is great, it's fantastic, but it depends strongly on why you're learning the language. So for example, if you're learning as a hobby, if you're not on a deadline, that's fantastic, that's great, and it's a very fun way to learn the language. However, if you have a Delhi exam coming up in 2 months and you're only watching TV shows, that might not necessarily help, and you may need a little bit more engagement or interaction from the perspective of the exam. So a little bit more active learning as well as passive learning in case you have a deadline or an exam. With all of that being said, I still highly recommend doing what I've been doing these past few days, because not only are you sourcing your vocabulary and making a vocabulary bank, most importantly, you are learning with context, which is extremely important when it comes to vocabulary learning and can make a big difference in your ability to use a certain word that you have learned. With consistency, repetition, and some form of active recall, you might even become a vocabulary powerhouse. If you find this video helpful, I have made a ton more regarding my own vocabulary and note-taking system, how I went about sourcing vocabulary, how I wrote it down, how I learned it, etc. in many videos, and I'm going to make sure to link them somewhere. So do check it out. I think that'll be helpful for you. And if you have any questions regarding this, please reach out in the comments or in my email. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.